And here to discuss this topic, Bryan Long is the Director of Product Management at North. He is focused on driving value through developer integrations in fintech and payments, currently leads the developer experience value stream at North, including managing the developer portal. Bryan, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, John, thanks for having me.
It's a fascinating world, this world of developers. Not something I have to admit to understanding. So I appreciate the conversation today. Let's dive right in, Bryan. You know, the industry is undergoing some significant changes. ISVs are disrupting traditional models. They're expanding their value propositions beyond basic transaction processing. How do you see these changes playing out, and how do you think changes in the vertical SaaS market will eventually affect payment processing?
Yeah, I really like that you started this out with a question about vertical SaaS, because that's really where so much of the innovation is happening today, especially when it comes to software meeting payments and the combination of those two things. I think in order to really understand where we're at today, it's important to take a look back at the past, several decades. So if you'll go on a journey with me, let's look at how this ecosystem has evolved. And more importantly, let's think about how software companies or ISVs have viewed payments initially as a burdensome thing that they must, check off their lists to do, and turn those into an actual revenue stream. So if we go back, the earliest model where software companies were working with payments companies was strictly a referral model. So if you think back to the, originally online bookstore of Amazon that launched in 1995, saying that was 30 years ago. They were leveraging this referral model. Similarly, a few years later, PayPal launched in 98 with a referral model. And with that, the software company would simply refer the client over to the payment service provider so that the payment could be made. And the two user experiences were totally disparate. So the value to the ISV was really just in selling their product. They were not monetizing the actual payment. So a few years later, a new model emerged, which is called the ISO model, Independent Sales Org. And there were a couple different actual subflavors within the ISO model that I think are important to explain. The first one that gained prominence was the retail ISO model. And so, if we push forward our chronology here a few years, Shopify started leveraging this in 2006. That was how they were doing payments at the time. And with the retail ISO model, they were still just referring customers over to the payment service provider. They weren't assuming any risk, so they weren't on the hook for chargebacks or fraud. They weren't handling underwriting. The only really significant change from that referral model is that they could embed into their UI some of the merchant boarding functionality. So when a merchant goes to work with a payments processor, they have to submit their information. And so that would be embedded within their own user experience. Kind of continuing forward, we have that wholesale ISO model. One of the first big vertical SaaS companies to leverage this was MindBody. So super well known still today in the fitness and wellness space. And so they became a registered ISO in 2010, and they leveraged this model. And this was a pretty significant shift in the paradigm, because you had the first view of embedded payments, right? Where the actual software company could embed the payments directly into their software. So the user doesn't have to leave that interface. It really feels, from a user's perspective, like one experience, right? The other upside is that the software company enjoys a lot more of the revenue share from the actual payment processing. Depending on the setup with the wholesale model, depending on the setup with the payments processor, that ISO could actually start taking on some of the underwriting. They'd be responsible for the chargeback and fraud. So it can be accomplished in a bunch of different ways, depending on the risk appetite of the software vendor. Then, continuing to move forward, now we have the PayFac model. So this is the kind of third large model. Square was the first one to come out with that. That was in 2009. They were leveraging this PayFac model. And the difference here is that you have one master merchant account that is underwritten, and then they have sub-merchants that they board under that. So a lot faster boarding, but significantly higher risk for the software company. So way more potential for chargeback and fraud risk to be pushed up to that software company, but obviously higher revenue share. So, I think what we've seen since then in the past 15 years is just like an absolute explosion of digital services and digital payments. So if you think back to that time, 2011, Mark Andreessen coined that famous phrase, "Software will eat the world," and I'm sure you're familiar with. And at the time, that was a pretty bold prediction. I mean, this was 4 years after the iPhone came out, so BlackBerry was still a dominant phone. And if you look forward those 15 years, think about what's happened today. I mean, we're using our phones to hail taxis. I mean, who even uses the word taxi anymore? I've got a 5-year-old who literally doesn't know what a taxi is. She just calls it an Uber. To order and pay for food and have it delivered at our doorstep minutes later. I mean, many of us do the majority of our shopping online. So we've seen, it's not obvious that software, it's not only obvious that software has eaten the world, but I think payments have eaten software. And that's true with a lot of those use cases. So I think just kind of let's push that forward now. Interesting, statistic, this, worldwide digital payments market, it's projected to grow at a 16% growth rate annually. And so we're talking by 2029, a total addressable market of $36 trillion. So obviously massive pie, right? We're looking at the total pie. And to bring it back to your question about vertical SaaS, I think the point here is that even a thin slice of that wider pie is still a massive total addressable market. So that's what we're seeing today, is that vertical software now exists for pretty much any industry you can think of. So you have, automotive service software, you have, golf course software, you have field services software, and those slices can keep getting more and more narrow. You can have software, we were saying earlier, software for barber shops, right? Not just software for salons, but actually barber shops, or software for solar installers. I mean, that's been a massive market that's blown up in the last few years. So pretty much whatever you can think of, there's an app for that, and there are payments embedded in that app. And so what we're seeing right now at North, the ISVs that we're working with, the kind of sweet spot between all of those models, the software companies absolutely want to own the payment experience in their UI. They absolutely want to own the merchant boarding experience within their UI. And for the most part, they do not want to be in charge of underwriting merchants or owning the liability of chargeback and fraud. And so, at North, that's something that we excel at. So we're happy to do that on behalf of our software partners. So it's kind of a summary of where the industry is at today when it comes to that, intersection between payments and software.
Well said, Bryan. So, we also know ISVs, as you pointed out, are increasingly offering integrated payment solutions that combine business management tools with payments functions. How does North help to enable that kind of experience?
Yeah, so the way that North enables that experience is through APIs and through our developer portal. So North Developer is our API dev portal that we just launched in December, along with the year-long effort to rebrand our company as North. And the North Developer portal offers developers and ISVs access to our API docs, code samples, sample apps that you can actually leverage. And basically, so say you've got a software company who is an e-commerce marketplace or has an online store. We have a payment API that software company can embed into their software, be it an app that's run on a phone or a web app that runs on a browser. We have a payment API that they can embed into their workflow. Say you're a software company who wants to do some online transactions and some in-person card-present transactions. We have a bunch of semi-integrated solutions that they could leverage in conjunction with actual terminals, card readers. So we work with Pax and Ingenico card readers. And when I say semi-integrated, it just means that the sensitive card data is kept off of the ISV server. So it reduces the PCI scope for that ISV. And the way that we do that is by just sending back a token that represents the transaction. So the software company can use that token for subsequent transactions, like a void or a refund. They can use it for card on file. So say you want to build a buy now, pay later program or set up recurring payments. That's common functionality that we see that ISVs are doing. Yeah, let's see. North Developer also does that a couple other ways. Other APIs that we have, I think if you think about what's happening in the market right now, so much of what ISVs and software companies want is access to more of that data so that they can run their own analytics, build out their own CRMs, their own portals, and keep the end user within their experience. So we've got a couple APIs that allow them to do that. One is the merchant boarding API. And so what that does is it facilitates the merchant onboarding to North. And so I think the best way to kind of explain that is contextualize it through a use case. So we have an ISV that we work with called First Mile, and they're an automotive services ISV. So think of your neighborhood auto repair shop, right? First Mile goes to those auto repair shops and recruits them to use their software. And it has all kinds of features, like it's a super, super feature rich software. So it has like an employee module where clock in, clock out. It has information about the actual goods. So the sale of goods, restocking actual items. And of course it does payments. And in order for First Mile to add a new automotive shop to the wider software, that merchant has to be boarded to North, right? So merchant boarding API allows that to be done digitally. And so maybe just to paint a little bit more of a picture of like the before and after, before First Mile was leveraging this API, their sales agents would go out to these neighborhood automotive services shops with, pen and paper, kind of give their sales pitch, try and convert the shop to buy their software. And the business owner would complete the merchant application on paper, which would then get faxed in. So you can kind of imagine this back and forth that then happens. I don't know when the last time you faxed anything was, but it's just like, did you go through? What's happening? When am I hearing back? And obviously that's super error prone. It's inconsistent, just like literally handwriting and what happens there. So, a few years ago, we worked with First Mile so that they could integrate this API into their wider software stack. And this has digitized that whole flow, right? So no longer are they physically sending out agents with paper apps. They're now calling up automotive services shops. Sometimes they do sales still in person, but whole point is that this whole thing has been digitized, which just completely reduced the number of errors and sped up the time to market to board new merchants. One quote from that case study that I love is one of the VPs of their business said, now it used to take weeks to board a new merchant, and now it takes minutes thanks to the power of the merchant boarding API. So I feel like that just kind of contextualizes the power of APIs and this kind of digital transformation that's happened in the last 5 to 10 years. We've got a couple other APIs that also provide really rich data experiences for ISVs. So we've got a business reporting API and a merchant reporting API. And without going into too much detail, these just give data to our partners so that they can see their whole merchant portfolio. So if they want to build out transaction reporting dashboards, if they want to show disputes, if they want to compare across stores how sales are going, all of that can be done through the power of these APIs. So, I think it's just important that we kind of say that, through these tools, North just enables this really data-rich environment for our software vendors to leverage and create their own user experiences with.
So, Bryan, tell us a little bit about the North Developer Portal and what are some of the business dynamics that are affecting the developer community right now?
Yeah, you bet. So I think the number one thing that we're really seeing is the rise of developer as a decision maker at companies. So no longer are developers kind of relegated away to the cold, dark basements to code in obscurity. I know that was always just a bad stereotype, but with the rise of this technical founder, right, we're really seeing developers be leveraged as important decision makers across all technology decisions in companies. And, for the last couple of years, most decisions happening at companies are technology decisions. Technology is just so interwoven into the everyday fabric of most modern companies that the biggest trend we're seeing is the rise of developer as a decision maker. And I think at North, we've recognized this. And the reason that North Developer is so successful, because as developers ourselves, we recognize this, and then we built a platform around that. So like just as a data point, for the third year in a row, we won first place in Straw Hacker Group's API Best of Breed Awards. And we did that because we built a platform with developers for developers. Just a few of the pieces that we built into that North Developer platform that I'll talk about. So we have like really robust tooling for developers. We have Postman collections for our APIs. So that helps developers get up and running way quicker than looking through, manual PDFs or old school documentation. We have code samples, and not just, every dev portal has code samples now, but we have full GitHub repositories with sample apps embedded into them. So as a developer, you can go on our GitHub repo, all open access. You can clone that repo and have a sample app where you can play around in a sandbox environment. So you can get our APIs up and running just in a matter of minutes. Obviously, the apps that ISVs end up coding to will be different than our sample apps, but it gives developers a tool to get started that ends up getting them to production way faster. And most importantly, I think the other piece that we have is we really have white glove service for our ISVs. And by that, I mean that we have a team of sales engineers. They're technical engineers who just explain our solutions and help in the pre-sales process. We have a team of integration engineers, which come in after that pre-sales process to assist ISVs all the way through to certification. And then we have a team of RMs, or relationship managers, that help ISVs into production to board their first merchants. So one thing that we know is that developers love working with North because they know that they have a real human who's going to be there, right? Answering their calls, picking up the phone, and answering emails. So I think, yeah, there's been a lot of power in being able to catalyze that idea of developer as a decision maker.
So let's talk about alternative payments a little, Bryan. How did they play in the North ecosystem, and are you currently considering adding any APMs to the current selection?
Yeah, so we do have several APMs, alternative payment methods, available. I mean, as a consumer, the one I use every day is Apple Pay. I think that's top of wallet, for me, as an Apple lover. So yeah, we have Apple Pay embedded on most of our integrations, and super I'm really also excited that we have Tap to Pay on iPhone. Tap to Pay on iPhone allows merchants to accept contactless payments with only an iPhone, and we're one of the first payment service providers to offer that. We're doing that through Pay Anywhere, our point of sale company. Let's see, other APMs. I think, in the last, certainly just before COVID, so let's call it 7 years, there's been a huge surge in buy now, pay later. We also offer that through a couple vendors. And we also have via the dev portal, we have that available as an API, so a recurring billing API that would allow an ISV to build their own buy now, pay later module. So basically split a payment up over time and have that be set up into a recurring payment. So yeah, I agree. I think alternative payment methods are really important, and we're seeing them being used more and more commonly.
So Bryan, for a final question, I have a very long two-part question. So here we go. But I did want to point out, what you guys are doing highlights a trend in the business, which is the democratization of payment technology through APIs. As we talked about, it has enabled ISVs to create innovative and custom-made payment solutions. But to your mind, what are some of the key aspects of a developer-friendly platform that can foster this innovation in fintech?
Yeah, I really like that you use that phrase, the democratization of payments technology through APIs, because obviously that's what North Developer is really about. So our dev portal, you can go today, you can literally sign up for a free account, you can access our API docs, you can use our GitHub repos, you can spin up sample apps. We have, under each product, we have sample apps that you can literally clone the GitHub repo for free to use. So when you were talking about democratization, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's it, right? So this landscape is open and available to anybody. I think, there's a lot more tech enabling innovation now than there ever was before. So we spoke a decent amount about these, waves of technology, these different models where software providers would work with payment systems. And I think when we think about the next wave of technology that's kind of crashing down on us, or the floodgates are opening right now, that's AI, right? I think it's hard to have a technology conversation in 2025 without talking about AI. This is definitely unfolding before our eyes. And I think the incredible thing here and how it plays into this space is that anyone with a good business idea can literally spin up a proof of concept website or a web app with no code tools on a weekend. Like the amount of AI tools that are out there that have just been released in the last 6 months, I mean, it's really, really incredible. Like, you no longer have to be a technical founder backed by VC funding in order to access these tools and to spin up a proof of concept. It's like, thanks to AI, normal people who have great ideas can literally spin up a working proof of concept over the weekend. I mean, don't get me wrong, like, to have an enterprise grade platform, you still need full development teams. It is still very expensive to build enterprise grade software, but you can get started with a proof of concept very, very quickly. So, I think open APIs backed by AI, that's where true democratization of payments and technology really comes in.
Okay. It's great. Great interview. That's going to do it for this episode of Payments TV. My name is John Gaffney. My guest has been Bryan Long, Director of Product Management at North. Bryan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate the time to speak to you today.